It was music that made me want to be an artist. Like, I was so in love with The Used. They just connected with me like nothing had. That's another example of not just things you like. The first time I heard it, I was like, oh, whoa, this is way too angry. I was still very religious and I don't like the swearing. The feeling got me of like, oh, wow, but that is really saying something you are not saying. Just that experience of like, oh, they're like saying this for you. And when I started wanting to be an artist, my mind immediately went to like, oh, I want to make something that makes me feel how that made me feel.
I'm Jai.
I'm Cara.
I'm Ryan.
And this is the Metamorphosis podcast limited series, and we talk about everything mindset, content creation, and creativity. And today we've got Ryan here with us, and I'm really excited to dive into, what are we diving into today?
So many different things, actually. We just want to learn more about Ryan.
I just want to hear some wild stories, Ryan.
Yeah.
Like
Right.
your wild stories, actually.
This is the limited series? Is there an unlimited series?
Well, my podcast is actually unlimited. You can listen to this one. But
Shameless plug.
yeah,
Good to
make
know.
your break. But this one is a limited series of amazing artists from all over the place, including yourself.
Fantastic.
And you're going to share some wild stories and things on creativity.
Yeah.
Okay.
Kind of where we're going. So, do you want to just start with just introducing yourself and then tell me who you are?
I'm Ryan. You might remember me from a couple of days ago. And we've been friends for a lot of years. Hopefully you remember me from that. I'm a photographer. I shoot mainly film. Yeah. I don't really do almost any like paid work. I'm not really like trying to be for hire. I just make my own stuff. I sell prints. I teach. I like to travel.
Yeah.
You know.
It's so interesting that you've had such a like long career, and actually I'd say like such an amazing career with the work that you do, where you don't actually charge for any work.
I would say career is a bit of a stretch. I live with my parents, so I'm not sure you can call it a career. But yeah, I don't know. I never wanted to. I don't like the feeling of doing photo jobs. I don't like the exchange of we need this many $1,000 worth of this many good photos. I never know what that means or what that looks like. So I don't know. I've tried a couple of times, and I do some stuff. Like I have a friend in a band, and I've done some album covers for them. But most of the like commission work I do is for people that know me really well. Like we just want you to do your thing, like work on this. That's fine. But if someone's saying like, I'm hiring you to execute this for
Here's
me.
a Pinterest board for you.
Yeah,
Like, no, thank
I'm
you.
not very good at that.
Yeah.
So.
How did you discover photography? Was this always something that you loved?
No. I was a camera assistant working on movies and TV shows.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, and I really needed a creative outlet. I was really depressed. And a friend suggested it to me, I think. I was in the camera department, but I really wasn't like doing any of my own photography. And a friend that was a makeup artist suggested, like, I think you need a creative outlet. Like, I said, well, I'm not good at anything like that. So what do you mean? And she's like, oh, these new digital cameras, they're crazy. You just set it to the green box and point it at something and it makes something pretty reasonably good. Like, I'll model for you. Like, a couple days from now during lunch, the set had lights on it and stuff. And she's like, well, just shoot in there. You won't even have to figure out the light or anything. We'll just shoot during lunch. And that was pretty much the first shoot I ever did.
Wow. And how did it go?
It was really, it made me fall in love with it. Like,
Really?
it really brought out that I did need a creative outlet.
I love
Did
that.
you fall in love with the like using the green box and shooting that digital camera, or did you fall in love with like creating something with somebody else in that partnership?
I think I fell in love with trying to make something that felt like a way I felt inside. I'm still not that specifically attached to photography. If I could trade it for being like great at singing or great at painting or great at sculpting, I would in a heartbeat.
Interesting.
So I think of it as kind of like the bastard child of the arts for a reason, because it really is so easy compared to other arts. You know, if we had a stranger and we had him walk in off the street and handed him the brand new Canon with an L series lens on it and set it to full auto and said, point at her and make something, you'd probably look at it and be like, oh, that's not bad. And if you handed him a block of marble and a chisel and were like, just express yourself, he'd be like, oh, well, that's terrible. So I think of it as kind of like a lower art form, and that's like sad if you're all your self-esteem's based on the photography, but really cool in it's so accessible. Like basically anyone could get into this if they need some tool for expressing themselves.
Okay, speaking about that, what do you wish more photographers knew? Like if you could just on Instagram, I know there's been a lot of frustration with that, and they take down work, and it's hard to post things. Is there anything that, when you see other photographers doing their work, where you feel like, wow, they're really tapped into something special? What does that look like?
For me, it looks like the feeling that they personally care about what they're doing, that they've done it enough, or they're doing it for a reason that is coming through in the work of this matters to me more than this does well or looks well. And as I've gotten older, that's really diversified into, I now am drawn to work and follow work that I wouldn't say like, this is the kind of stuff I'm interested in. This is, because we're turning into a little echo chamber.
Yeah.
If you just look at the work you like and then you make the work like that and then that's your community, it's very, very
incestuous.
Circular.
Yeah.
And there's some people I love following where the work I don't know, it falls in a category outside of what I would put down on paper, like this is the stuff I think is cool, this is the stuff I'm interested in, this is how I like to communicate, to just see like, I'd rather get the feeling of this person cares about what they're doing and is making it for a reason, because then it triggers that in me, like, right, I want to do that. I want to make stuff for me that makes me feel like looking at their work, just bringing up that same feeling rather than digesting work that like looks like my work or like
imitation.
I want to make. Yeah,
that's beautiful. That authenticity is something that you can't even quantify it. I don't know how to quantify it. It's just that gut feeling that, wow, this person's creating something that means something to them and makes you feel something. Yeah, I've been thinking about that more.
Like with the work that you create, even today, are you still like really intentional of going in and not really knowing what it's going to look like, but like feeling on how you want to like create something? Because a lot of your stuff's a collaboration with somebody else.
Yeah.
Like, is it a lot to do with you and less about them, or is it a lot to do with both of you guys coming together and creating something?
Yeah, I never have ideas for photos. I mean, I've been trying to, I said that for a while. Like, I never do, and lately I've been trying to have a few and just see how that goes.
You're trying to come up with an idea.
But I'm not a very big, like, ideas for my work guy. I'm much more, like, I want to get in a place I want to be in, light I want to shoot in, with people I want to be with, and then, because I'm much more observant than I am creative. Like, like, I have this idea and I want to make it happen. I'm much more, like, paying a lot of attention to what's going on around me. And eventually, when, with good people, good light, with your cameras there, you start to recognize, like, oh, that looks like something I would do. And that's much more how I shoot than conceptually.
Do you think much about like storytelling when you shoot? Like, are you thinking like one image or?
No, I'm almost never trying to string it together into conveying something cohesive. It's always just moments of recognition of like, oh, that looks like a thing to me.
Yeah.
Or like.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah.
I know a lot of the work that you've created that's really close to you. For example, like, I know you've shared a story before about your sister, and then like a full photo doco series that you did through an experience that they had. Like with things like that, are you like more compelled to create work like that where it's like something that's really meaningful like to you and to somebody else? I know it was like really meaningful to your sister.
Those are kind of different categories of work for me, because in the just getting together it can be whatever you want it to be is more like the creative or just whatever space. But I've also documented some big events for family members and friends. I've actually shot quite a few funerals.
Yeah.
I had a niece that passed away at 10 days old, and I was shooting her life and shot her funeral. And then as my grandparents started dying, I photographed their funerals.
Wow.
And I've shot a couple family friends like right before they died as well. And it's different and kind of the same. It's different in that I'm still doing the just, not like I have an agenda, I need a shot of you here, and by this, it's much more just paying attention and being like, oh, that seems important, that seems relevant, that seems like something I want to capture. But I guess with those, there is a little more storytelling, because it's more documentary. I want to produce this body of work about this experience. But I don't really do that kind of work in my just for
in the
me
work that you create for yourself. Yeah, I know that you said that you don't really ever create work at home, and it's always when you're on the road and stuff. So like, why do you feel compelled that you need to be out of your environment and into a different environment to be able to create?
I'm just that kind of person. You know, my favorite thing is to just go on a trip, is to be gone, is to be in a new country, is to be in a new place, is to be out. And that just starts my brain of like, oh, I have to figure out how the metro works. I have to figure out how to eat here. I have to find out how to meet this person and get to them. And it just creates the headspace of, I'm out doing things and figuring things out. And figuring things out is a lot of shooting, you know, like, And when I wake up at home in my bed, it's just like, well, what are we supposed to do today? Get breakfast, cuddle my cat. It doesn't, being home doesn't spark the like, I've got to get something made, but being on a trip does almost every time. So yeah, the percentage of my work that I would call like my portfolio is hugely weighted towards travel.
Interesting. Could you maybe tell us one of the last times where you really felt inspired, like you were shooting something, anything, where you really felt like, okay, this is important, and you felt proud of the work that you created?
This last year, and I'm going back soon, I met up with a group of 9 other photographers.
Yeah,
and
tell us more about that.
We went to Sardinia and rented a house on the beach for like 8 days. And the whole goal was just to get together and meet and shoot a bunch. But everyone was a photographer. There were no just like models or people coming to be shot. So everyone had to model for each other's projects.
Wow.
And everyone got along really well. And there were some really interesting group dynamics. And 5 or 6 countries at least, a bunch of different languages, men and women. And we all were staying in the house wasn't huge. We were all just basically in the same little space together for a week. And everyone was so talented too. And I made a couple images in that I was really, really proud of. I was working a little bit on, I say like I don't have any ideas for photos, and I've been really comfortable with that. You know, now I know I make good work and I know how I make it, so you can just keep going. But I went in with a little bit more of a like, well, I don't want to think that's impossible for me. I'd love to, even if I don't end up liking it, I'd like to say like I have this general vibe or concept in mind that I want to be working on. And so I did that, and it was interesting to see how wanting to make stuff around like a certain theme was mixing with like, well, I never had like here's the idea for the photo.
So you kind of like challenge yourself and put yourself out of your comfort zone a little bit by thinking about what you can create.
It was barely out of my comfort zone. I mean, it was such a relaxed environment, but it was more about the thought of, and to be honest, what I did was, and I've done this a couple of times, my very first starting point of the thing I set up was directly referenced from a frame in a movie.
Oh, I love that.
It was a movie that like really had an impact on me, Persona by Bergman, I think he's Swedish director. It's like a black and white movie from the 50s. It's just amazing.
Persona, okay.
And it has some really amazing 2-person shots in it. Just very, very unusual framing and composition. So one of the first shots that I did to get into it was recreating, I mean, it's so close that I was basically trying to recreate it. But just starting out in that space of seeing what it felt like to set up this shot that I really loved, and then just working from there and making my own stuff. I think, I don't know who said it. It might be Hemingway or something. I shouldn't say that when I don't know who it was. But I've heard of the exercise when you're a writer of like getting out like a Hemingway novel and just typing. Just opening the book and just typing out the words just to like be in the space of like
creation,
doing the thing. And you know, it's obviously not your work. You're just like setting up their thing, but it can put you in the space of like, on the movie, you're just a viewer, you know, but when I'm positioning the people and seeing where I would put the camera, even though it's not really like my idea for the photo, it created the space of like, this was the concept I wanted to explore and work on, and here I am in it, and then that kind of spurred doing other stuff.
This is exciting. I love hearing this. Just thinking, you know, Hemingway, that clear, distinct, precise
shouldn't
writing.
say Hemingway, I don't know
whoever
who it was.
but that advice. But that's such an interesting thing, stepping into the shoes of the mindset I think so much of creativity is mindset, and maybe because we're also accustomed to social media, I feel like a lot of people have lost sight of that. I feel like there's a disconnect.
You also talk about, Cara, that you shouldn't wear lots of hats when you're creating.
Yeah.
You know, so it's like you're trying to create, but then you're trying to do your taxes, and then you're trying to do social media, and you're trying to do all these other things.
Those are all different mindsets.
And then it's like next minute, it's like, what are you creating? It's just really hard to get into that zone.
Mm.
And what you're talking about is like getting out of your lounge room and then like putting yourself into a new space where it's only the one thing that you're like consumed by.
Yeah.
It's really cool.
Yeah, I think that's probably the main element of being away from home. When you're at home, you like need to do your laundry and need to do your taxes and need to pick up groceries. But when you're on a trip, it's like, this is it. This is the whole experience.
Stuff else to do.
Yeah, so it's so much easier to stay in that. And constraints, you know, always like breed creativity. It's like, oh, we're only here for 7 days. Like, if you want to make stuff in this place, you've never been with these people. Who knows if you'll ever see them again? Like, it's go time, and that
you also
helps.
don't know so many factors. Like a lot of the times, like you don't really, like you're saying, it's like the metro, the weather, like how to get somewhere. So there's like so much tension there.
And it puts you in problem solving brain.
Yeah.
And that's a good spot for me to shoot from.
That's where you create.
We've been talking a lot about that within the scope of this course, actually, is creating with restraints and the importance of limits. Can you think of any other specific instances where you've done that, where there was like a very specific circumstance that was just a challenge, and you're like, you know what, I have to make it work with what I have, and then you did it, and it turned out better than you thought?
That's one of my favorite things about shooting film, is you can pick a camera that forces you to work in a different way. I did a couple photos of my friend and her baby, and I only took my 4x5 camera.
Wow.
So, you know, immediately you're in this like, oh, I have to be so careful. You need to know everything you're doing. Like, you're going to do 2 or 3 shots max. Like, is that really what you want to be? Is this really where you want to be? Versus like just using my point and shoot cameras, or, you know, just using, I think that's kind of a limitation of digital, is basically all the cameras are the same camera now. Like it's just this, and it works like this. And with film, today I brought my waist level square camera, and immediately my brain's like, oh, whoa, how are you going to take a photo with this? How's it going to look like you want it to look? So often, that'll just come from specifically choosing film gear that's going to force me to work differently.
Yeah, I feel like you use a lot of gear that would really restrict you in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is cool though, because then you're mastering it and you learn the little quirks of each little body. I loved watching you the other day, just shooting with, how many film cameras did you bring? It was
like 9
like
or
9.
10?
So many in different film stocks. It's exciting to watch. Pivoting slightly, but would you say that with your artistic identity and voice, is that something that just happened naturally for you? When I look at your work, it's very distinctly you. I do get a sense of melancholy from it a lot of the time. It seems...
And beauty.
Beauty. It's like beauty, it's slow, it's intentional. It has this mood to it that feels very you. Has it been like that from the start, or do you feel like that's something that's been at the course of your life?
I think it definitely finds you after a period of time, but really early on, I knew how I wanted it to feel. Because it was music that made me want to be an artist. Like,
really?
I was so in love with The Used, like the first few albums from The Used.
I didn't know that, yeah.
They just connected with me like nothing had. And that's another example of not just things you like. The first time I heard it, I was like, oh, whoa, this is way too angry. And I was still very religious, and I don't like this swearing, and this content is too much for me.
It was uncomfortable.
But I associated, the feeling got me of like, oh, wow, but that is really saying something
That's real interesting.
you are not saying.
Yeah.
And just that experience of like, oh, they're like saying this for you.
Wow.
Kind of really developed. And then when I started wanting to be an artist, my mind immediately went to like, oh, I want to make something that makes me feel how that made me feel. And then it took years and years of figuring out who you are and how you work and all that to find it. But I knew what I was going for. I knew that when I made it, and I felt that from my own work, I would know that that's what it was supposed to be like.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
Because even if it wasn't premeditated, it did have such a strong element of you in it. And you spoke briefly, and we don't have to touch on this too much, depression and how that's manifested in your work. That's something that I've been experiencing and have experienced, especially over the last 7 years. And it's interesting. I feel like it's showed up in ways that were unexpected to me, and mindset shifts have shifted my work even. Have you experienced that? Like,
yeah, I think it played into that I wanted my work to be beautiful, but not an advertisement. I wanted I don't know anyone that doesn't want, well, there's a few, but the main reaction artists want from producing something is people will see it and be like, oh wow, I love this. And I wanted that a lot, but what drew me to the used music was it was so beautiful and melodic and well done, but also so sad and angry and emotional. And I mean, I'm just an emo kid at heart. I don't think it'll ever change. But just the blend of that being like, this is to be seen as beautiful and personal, and it has all those elements, but the other side of it is whatever is making you do it, whatever the impetus, whatever the emotion behind it is, isn't getting left out of that in favor of this is really happy or digestible.
How do you dive deeper into that? If you were teaching a brand, mentoring a new photographer who maybe they were younger, they haven't really identified the things that are them yet, where do you start? You know, if somebody's really feeling like, wow, I really love that he's feeling this connection to these things, but I don't even know what I'm connected to yet. They're like a blank slate almost. Where do you start with that? Do you have any advice?
All the stuff they're drawn to that isn't photography. Because as soon as you're just, this is what I'm trying to do with photography, you're referencing someone that already did it, and probably did it for a more personal reason than you're understanding, and probably did it better than you're about to do it by being inspired by their photo. So for me, it's just like, what books do you love? What movies do you love? What music do you love? What sculpture do you love? What
do you love? Yeah.
Yeah, but completely.
Or what do you hate as well?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to just be what you love.
Tomatoes.
What did you hate? What challenges you? What, like you said before, it's like you were listening to the music and it was like the words that you weren't saying, you know, and then maybe that's inspiring you. It's like an outlet. Like with your photos, you could be sharing something that you're not saying or you're not sharing, and it comes out in your work, you know?
Yeah. That's just for me, though. I don't care what everyone else is doing.
Well, that's,
you know,
that's
if you're just
amazing.
trying to make great advertisements and have people pay you for them, like, great, I don't care.
Yeah, exactly.
But I find that that's what's so beautiful and empowering about your work, though, is that you don't care, but you do. You care deeply about the work itself, not how it's going to be received, perceived, or liked, maybe. Or is
I've been pretty lucky with that because
Yeah.
I knew, you know, I was like my own harshest critic. Probably everyone is, but I also had a strong enough desire to make something that made me feel a certain way that I could really shut out a lot of criticism too. Like, I knew I would know when I saw it and had made it that that's what I was trying to do, and that was the ultimate goal. Not to make money, not to get a job, not to get accepted with it, was to be like, this music was so important to me. Can you make something that you would also say, this is so important to me? And I knew I would know when I had done it. And I think that was probably really helpful in finding my personal way with it. I had a pretty, not specific vision, but I knew I would know when it meant that to me. And it did go like that.
I hope you know that you're a real artist.
All right.
I think you're really amazing.
Thanks.
Yeah, it's kind of exciting, actually. I'm feeling inspired.
Just giving all
I'm
the
like
compliments
fangirling.
straight out.
I know, like, wow. No, I think that's so beautiful, though, and refreshing. I don't hear that very often.
It has a lot of drawbacks and downsides. I'm terrible at making money. I'm terrible at promoting myself. I'm terrible at trying to build on what I have and turn it into other stuff. I'm very just like, oh, I just want to shoot this and make this. And I've even, now that social media barely works and is all corrupted anymore, now I just don't want to share anything. I'll still shoot, never post it. And, you know, I'm not happy about that either. So, I don't know. I think I could do a lot more with my ability and work that I don't do, just because it's so hard for me to get into the mindset of like, well, now what is this good for? What are you going to do with this? My brain really just wants to have the experience, make the thing, and be done with it. And I was really into the having everybody see it and share it for a while, and now my brain's like, I don't even like that part anymore.
Yeah, okay. Have you thought about like having your own space and like having an exhibition at some stage, or like maybe making a photo book or something where it lives somewhere else?
I really want to do all that stuff. I can't make myself do any of it. When someone finally appears to be like, we're turning this into a book and we want to, that's how I had my gallery show. They approached me. I had a real gallery show in Boston for Leica, the camera company.
Wow, how was
And
it?
it was amazing. It was so cool. I worked with a curator, worked with the gallery. It was such a neat experience, but they approached me.
Yeah.
They said, like, we should do this. And I was like, great. And then I was so lucky to work with a talented curator, too. I didn't really have that headspace of someone might be really gifted at, like, putting your work together. And I submitted, 50 images, 70 images, and she came back with 21 images and was like, I think this would make a really strong show. And I was like, and then she said, we'll just go back and forth until we're both happy. And I was like, no, it's fantastic.
So you agreed with her on
Yeah, I didn't change a single image.
Wow.
Really? And you weren't disappointed, like, wow, I really wish you'd included that one?
No, that's what I mean. It was so interesting to see someone with a skill set I was totally unfamiliar with. She said this would be a strong show, and I looked at it and thought, yeah, that's really good choices.
Can you talk to me about what it felt like interacting with your work printed and on a wall and like large and not just on a little screen?
Always better.
And other people saying crap about it.
Yeah.
We're standing there going, I don't like this one.
Yeah, how was that? Like, walk us through it. What happened?
I mean, that's always been better for me. I'm so into printing. I love making prints. I've been getting into making platinum prints.
Really?
Yeah.
That's so cool.
I have little print sets of my work. I have all these little 4x6 prints that I'll keep in my camera bag in my car. And yeah, seeing them big and like professionally framed and like museum glass and all that was amazing. It was everything I wanted it to be. It's just so much better. It's tricky to figure out how to do it because the screens just connect us all and they're everywhere, and printing is expensive, and do people even want to buy the prints after you spent that much money on them? But just as an experience, it's the best.
Was it surreal in any way, like kind of an out-of-body experience of seeing your work and perceiving it almost as if you were somebody else, just some random stranger walking into the gallery, or was it always very distinctly you?
No, I would probably say no. Like, I had spent enough time with all those images because they weren't really for anything. They weren't part of an ongoing project. They weren't like, oh, I'm going to do an exhibition and this is the theme and I've been making this work and it's finally done. It was just like 15 years of shooting, and then it was like pick some important ones. So by the time I like saw them, it was amazing to like see them together, but it was very familiar. Like, I've been in this headspace of why these exist for a long time, not like a little short run to the end of this specific project. So it felt really familiar, I guess.
So for you, like, when the perfect collaboration comes along, you'll be able to create these things, but it's not something that you're forcing or pushing.
Yeah, which is amazing and a drawback. Like, sometimes I'll meet people and it's like, this is it. This is what I've been waiting for. This is the space and the headspace to make this stuff. But I'm also not very proactive. Like, now I got to find that new project. Now I got to find the next thing. I'll just go years, like, wishing, like, oh wow, I wish I was still doing that. And I'm just not very proactive at all, really. Which is, I don't know. It's hard to identify stuff as faults or whatever. I definitely wish I did more with it and was more proactive, but I'm also not like that. So it's hard to be like, would you even make the same stuff if you were this like go-getter proactive person about it? Would it look like all the stuff you made that you care about? I don't know. It's hard to think through all that.
Yeah, it's a strange balance, a strange line, hey?
Yeah. It's like a constant battle, actually. It's interesting though, being a creative and an artist, trying to interact with social media, trying to show up. You're trying to, I know that's not necessarily the goal here, but if somebody is, how do you show up in that space? How do you continue to post and like try to be relevant and book and make money and also not sell yourself out?
I haven't been doing any of that.
Yeah, I don't know how.
I went from posting like twice a day in the heyday and just meeting all these people and loving it to I've posted like 20 times in the past 2.5 years now.
Yeah.
I don't like the space anymore, and I know how necessary and public square-y it is. And to be honest, I need to get back into like, my best advice for myself probably right now is like do it without thinking about it. Like just say what you want to say and put the work out and let that be whatever it is. Because anytime I try to like take into account of what the spaces are, my immediate reaction is like, oh, I don't want to be there. I hate that.
Yeah.
Can you tell me, like, I know that you've been sort of like an educator or a teacher or mentor for a long time for a lot of people, talked at a lot of workshops. Can you tell me why that's sort of where you went, and maybe you can tell me about that workshop that we did in 2015 together in Australia?
I think I gravitated towards that. One, I still need money. And if people will, I don't want someone to say like, here's $2,000. I need $2,000 of good photos. I just hate that space. But if someone says like, oh, I want to buy a print of that, or I want to come hear about how you do that, or, you know, none of it's secrets or so personal I wouldn't tell anyone. So just the space of
being able to actually share about the work, not actually...
Yeah, and I love talking
Celebrate.
about art. I love talking about why I do stuff and what I'm interested in, and films that are inspiring it, and Michelangelo, and getting together with artists and trying to make stuff and taking portraits and stuff. I like all that space. If I was a millionaire, I don't think I'd do it, but maybe that'd be bad. You know, like I'm not driven to be an educator. I like the space, and when I need money, it's like, yeah,
It works.
the exchange feels really fine. I feel like I'm good at talking and teaching about art. Bless you. And I'm proud of how the events go and what they are. But I'm not really driven to be that. It just seems like an exchange for money where my brain's like, yeah, this is. I feel really comfortable with that.
Yeah, that's cool. Can you tell me about the workshop you did in Australia? Which was my first workshop ever, 2015.
The one out in,
Baby Jai.
what's it called, Mwilumba?
Yeah.
What?
Is that really what it's called?
Yeah.
Oh, dang. I can't remember anyone's name, but I remember
Yeah, what?
Mwilumba.
And you were patting kangaroos.
I was patting kangaroos. I got bit by a leech. There was a huntsman spider in my room.
Oh my.
Our model got leeched and started screaming in the middle of one of the shoots.
That was in the middle of the actual class. Remember?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, we're just sitting there talking.
We're sitting there talking, and she just starts screaming at the top of her voice.
And then she had like a leech on her leg, and I had to go
I
get
would
like
scream
salt and
too.
unleech
Gross.
her.
I hate leeches.
No, it was so good. I think that was the second time I came to Australia.
Oh, was it?
Yeah,
Oh,
I
wow.
think so.
You know what's really interesting with that is like we met probably like 2 years before that, I think, in 2013 or something. So we've known each other for like what, 11 years or
Yeah.
something. And then I was like, we should do a workshop, man. It'll be fun. We'll like put together, you know, some camping, and I got this place we can do it and everything. And then you were just like, yeah, all right. And I feel like we didn't get paid.
Yeah.
Like, remember, we didn't sell enough
we
tickets,
made very much.
so we didn't get paid. And then we did all this
Relatable.
work, and it was like, oh man.
Yeah. I've always been like that. As soon as someone that I like is like, we're gonna do this thing, and I'm gonna do a lot of the making sure we're gonna do it, my brain's like, absolutely.
You're like, sweet.
Yeah. See somewhere new, go make some stuff.
So you find yourself, you say yes to a lot of these like quote unquote opportunities. Some of them not so much a great opportunity. Where,
Yeah,
you know,
like
it's not
yesterday,
paying off.
someone was like, if you do this podcast, I'll buy you dinner. And I was
Oh,
like,
nice.
dinner? Whoa, this seems like a good opportunity.
And here we are.
And here we are. It's the magic of how it all comes together.
Later we panned us eating dinner. It's just-
You said free margaritas or something? I haven't seen one yet, though.
No, it's no margaritas yet.
Oh,
No, that's pretty cool.
yeah.
So we also were going to put together a. I was actually telling Cara about this, but the Ray and J tour,
Yeah.
where we're just going to cruise
Ray and
around.
J.
Yeah, Ray and J tour. We're going to cruise around. I look at those posters sometimes. It was like I felt like it was the right idea at the wrong time.
Yeah.
Like way before its time.
Yeah.
And I feel like it would actually probably do good now, but not back then.
What we were wanting to do, and I still want to, I hate that all my friends have like spouses and kids and stuff.
I hate
Because I didn't find like what I wanted to do until I was like old. And now my brain's like, great, I want to be 21 with a group of friends that like just want to do this all
Yeah.
day. I wanted to go on tour as a photographer because I had toured with my friend's band a couple of times, and I was like, oh, this is the best. You're just all together every day, and you're eating these meals, and then you go do your art thing, and you just go to a new city you've never seen, and you do it again. And I wanted to do like a workshop series, like
Like a tour.
in a tour bus,
Everywhere,
like,
yeah.
and just spend
that'd be
like
so
a
fun.
month or two doing it.
Let's do it.
And we
Yeah.
had great branding too.
We
Jai's
had-
friend drew us up like all Miami Vice, like
Yeah, I have to
80s
show you
style. It
Oh, I
looked
see it.
so good.
Yeah, and then we had the full plan. So we actually, I booked a venue, and I don't know why, but we'll start in Australia, and then we'll come to the US, and then we'll get in a bus and then cruising around. But I think no one bought any tickets straight off the bat. We're like, I think we sold like 3 tickets or something. We're like, we're gonna be genius. This is gonna be awesome. Yeah,
And,
and then
I'm so bad at promotion too.
yeah, like
I
no
never
one-
want to talk
I
anyone
hate
into
promotion.
anything.
I know. Jai's really good at it.
I can promote.
You can promote, man.
Well, I tried, but it just didn't work.
Well, Ray and J2 Judgment Day.
Yeah, we're coming back.
you
people
heard it
won't
here
even know.
first, folks. Ray and Jay. On the road.
It's coming back.
bring things back a little bit to the course.
Now that we're done hearing stories from your path. Anyway, something relevant.
I've been thinking a lot about the concept of metamorphosis. That's what we're calling the course. I would love to hear your take on that. What does metamorphosis mean to you in a creative or metaphorical sense?
Oh, whoa.
Good question.
Yeah, it's a big one. But I feel like I'll have a cool answer, so I don't know.
Wow, that's a lot of pressure.
He's going to have a really cool answer.
Yeah, it's going to be...
Can you get a close-up on his face? We really need this, actually. Cut to the close-up. There he is. The answer is going to be so good.
No pressure, but this is going to blow our minds.
It's going to be profound. We're going to
What
make a
does
reel out of this.
metamorphosis mean to me?
It's kind of...
I don't know the answer to that. This is like the conceptual shoot thing. This is the like here's the assignment. Here's like what this thing means. My brain's always like, oh, nothing. I've got nothing.
All right, cut. No, just
Cut.
Zoom in.
No, I mean, I don't know. I'm being funny and serious. That really does feel like okay, your assignment is like take a shoot with this hat. My brain's always like, I wasn't thinking about taking a shot with a hat. And I don't have the brain type to be like, oh, what's this going to be? Like, how are we going to use this? It's way more recognition to me than here's the thing and what does this mean to you? So now that I knew that was the thing, if we were together for a couple of days, when that popped into my head of like, oh, this is like an example of when this thing turned into this other thing, that's what that is to me. But on the like, what do you think about this? Unless it's something that like I think about all the time, my brain's usually just like, nothing.
I don't.
Like,
Okay,
I don't
let
know,
me
I got
reframe it
nothing.
then.
Yeah.
Over the last couple of years, I know you've gone through a lot of different changes. I know like your cat died and there's been a lot of things that happened, especially with the pandemic and everything. Do you feel like there's an evolution to yourself on the macro and the micro of like that you might be changing? It could be for the better. Sometimes maybe you're in like rest stage, or sometimes you want to go out and create. Just that evolution.
To be honest, most of it was negative.
Mm-hmm.
I was so fueled by like I said, like getting out. Like, oh, home's really rough, but like you're gonna get out. You're speaking at 6 different conferences this year. You got 4 different workshops. Like that's almost a thing a month. I'll go for a week and a half each time. Like you don't have a lot of money and you're not super like, I don't know, mentally where you want to be, but it's a lot of stuff I really care about, and every time I do it I'm really happy, and then I make work that I love, and then people like the work that I made, and the pandemic was just like, oh, that's all gone. Like didn't do a workshop or conference in like 2.5 years.
Yeah,
like
wow.
And it was all of how I was supporting myself, and most of my like social activity and most of my like creative space like disappeared.
And also you love going away to go and create work, so all of a sudden you're just at home.
Yeah. I guess it made me more like immediately grateful for the space that I have. You know, like it lowered my expectations of like, yeah, sometimes you can't buy toilet paper and you're locked in your room for a few months, and that's the worst. So like, this is fine. Podcast and margaritas is like better than that. So what do you
Everything's
want?
up from there.
Yeah, but I mean, I guess also just staying open to lots of stuff's going to happen, and pay attention to it and see what that makes you think and feel, and if you want to make stuff about that. I mean, I guess to tie it back to a useful answer for you, since I haven't said anything to that question. When I was on that trip with the other photographers, I didn't really say, but the concept that I was working on expressing was non-happy, non-romantic intimacy. Because I had been through such crazy stuff. Like 4 people that were connected to my family died in the space of like 2 months, and my cat died in that 2 months, and I found out I had cancer. All in like 2 months. And when I was thinking back on it, like, how would you describe these experiences? The word that kept coming back to my head was intimate. But then when I thought of like, oh, like word association, intimacy, you know, it's like, oh, your partner, like Valentine's Day, like
Kisses.
Whispering secrets and like snuggling. You know, and so then I thought like, Oh, so that's not what I meant. But intimacy still felt like the... Now, guys laughing at my cancer story. Great.
Jesus.
Get
Get him
it
out of
together.
here.
It still felt like the right word. Like this was a very, very intimate experience. And a lot of them were still beautiful, but not in the like...
Traditional sense.
Check out these engagement photos on the beach at sunset. It was such an intimate session. You know, all the associations I had heard for the word didn't sound like what I meant, but I knew that word was what I meant, that what I wanted to create. So I started trying to create photos that felt intimate and like melancholy and distant at the same time. Because you'd think like distant and intimate would be not part of the same concept, but like watching people die and stuff. It was very intimate, but then this like massive distance involved.
That juxtaposition of the two, that's really cool.
Yeah, so going through that stuff brought out a new like headspace. I mean, I don't really know what I want to do with it, but I did make a couple of photos on that trip that did that for me, that when I looked at thought like, oh yeah, that's what I meant. Or not what I meant, but like, right, this does feel like that.
It resonates, it feels like
Yeah.
that feeling. Ooh, that's really interesting.
Yeah, I like that. It's like it's just the contrast, or when something can almost have two meanings. That it sounds like, you know, it's like it is the same meaning, but it's almost like you would visualize it completely different.
Yeah.
I get that.
Have you had any other instances like that where there is like a word? Or is it really just blind? You're just kind of coming in and you're like, okay, I haven't brainstormed. This is not premeditated. I'm just creating from what feels right in my gut.
That was the only time I can think of where I started from a specific word.
Yeah.
I've started from a point before, like when I got really into Michelangelo, the sculpture, not the turtle. The sculptor, not the turtle.
I love Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
It brought out, like seeing David in the Pieta, like really brought out something specific in my brain, like this specific feeling or headspace. And I took a couple like Pieta inspired photos, like man and woman, like being held, like kind of death, but like beautiful. That's another one. It's like so intimate, but she's holding his dead body. Where I kind of like took that as a reference point, but then wanted to make something different, but kind of started with how that made me feel in mind. But the intimate one's the only time I can think of that it was a word.
You know, so tell me a little bit more about your art background, because that's something that I don't have personally. You know, I know a lot of people I know who are photographers haven't all necessarily studied art. Yeah, tell me about that.
After I shot for a couple of years, I decided I'd been going to college. I was like a history major, and I'd just been doing a bunch of like not art classes.
Yeah.
And then I left because I just wasn't that into it. But I'd already finished like 2.5 years of college. And eventually I was like, oh, I actually finally care about something and really like it. And I've just been kind of, you know, doodling around with it. It might be worthwhile to like go, you're already halfway done with a university degree. You might as well go study the thing you care about now. And my favorite part of that was the art history classes. I really didn't expect that. I just wanted more photo knowledge, and I was kind of pissed about all the extra classes I had to take. And some of them I did just end up hating. But the art history really opened my eyes to a lot of stuff, which was kind of a good blend. I was always so into history too, but never like art history. And then when I cared about being an artist, it was like getting into like Michelangelo that really brought out like, oh man, some people have made some extremely powerful stuff. Not just beautiful, you know, like really evocative, layered, deep stuff. And that's what I was interested in anyway. So I'd say of like my art background, the thing that made the biggest influence was art history classes. And I had an amazing art history professor, so that really helped.
Tell me a little bit more about Michelangelo, like why you...
He uses the nunchucks.
Yeah.
He's kind of like the Joker of the group. He loves pizza. He was raised by a rat.
All right.
He got this like ooze on him when he was a little turtle. It was actually the same ooze that blinded Daredevil. Not a lot of people know that. But then he grew into a teenage mutant ninja turtle, as it were.
And then he made art.
And
Yeah.
Inspired by him.
And then apparently he started sculpting. Like he was all into like fighting ninjas and stuff, but then he found out he's really good at sculpting. No, I love high Renaissance art. I don't know why. I mean, it's kind of like cliche, but like not Da Vinci's okay. I'm a real Michelangelo guy. I don't know. There's something fascinating to me about that period where the richest people in the world, instead of trying to build penis-shaped rockets and beat their friends to space, were like, who's the best artist in the world? Like, I want to fund these unbelievable pieces of art with incredible wealth is really fascinating to me. And I think it's probably because that would be like my dream, the patron system, where like some billionaire said like, I'm in love with what you're doing. I need this work. Here's enough money to live. You know, like, I'm not trying to get rich off it or anything, but like, here's the means to now be like pursuing your personal thing. I want the output of that. Just feels so much like of a better headspace to me than like, you gotta hustle, you gotta get it out there, you gotta let people know why they want this, you gotta like, and I'm sure there was, you know, I'm not living their life, I'm sure there was all kinds of elements of that involved, but the exchange being like someone of means recognizing it and being like, I want that. And not even a bunch, maybe not even a bunch of different people, you know, like a Medici family being like, oh dude, we're loaded. Here you go, you're our artist now. I would love to create like that.
What would you do tomorrow?
Yeah,
Billionaire.
probably the same thing I'm doing, but I'd have money.
Well, I like that bit. Okay, so you're in alignment. Were there any other art history moments that really impacted you? Like poignant moments where you were taking that class and something just connected and you were like, wow, like it just was kind of epiphany.
Seeing the start of the textbook kind of starts with the start of art. We were looking at like the Venus de Willendorf and the cave paintings in France and Spain. And it was very interesting to be like, now our whole culture is like, here's the thing I did, tag the place, tag me. This is my story, this is who I am, this is my journey. It's like everyone, you know, it's just social media, everything. But it started somewhere. You know, people were like trying to survive and get enough skins to stay warm and figure out how to migrate and grow crops. And at some point, some men and women were like, I need a time out. I'm going to go draw some horses. And the departure of that to be like, well, that doesn't help us survive. To be like, yeah, but I want to make this and I want to leave this, was so eye-opening that we're kind of like on this journey that people made time to start, that took time out of what was probably not easy to survive, to draw horses in a cave. I appreciated the mindset thought of, whoa, like, I don't want to say we take it for granted or whatever, but it's just so ubiquitous now. It's just so everywhere of like, I have my phone and we made a little behind the scenes-y and we tagged our lunch and like, this is my story. To think of what would your story be if your departure was like, you might not get enough food today if you want to take time to express this. Now what would you be wanting to say? Now what would you be wanting to make? And then just seeing work that really moved me that wasn't photography. Because when I started out, you know, okay, I'm a photographer. What's good photography? Oh, I really like this photographer. I'm going to work on this. And to start getting the inspiration from like seeing Michelangelo's David was like, holy shit, this is like one of the most amazing things I've ever seen in my life. And I'm feeling so much. And it was so much better because there was no worry that I was going to go try and copy it. It was just like the excitement of being in the presence of art and that headspace of looking at it, admiring it, and then being like, oh, I want to participate in this whole activity, versus I got really into like Richard Avedon's photography, and then I was trying to do white background stuff. But then you suck compared to that. You know, now you thought this was so cool, but it's too close to what you do. So then when you go try and do the thing that's inspired by it, it's like, oh, it reminds me of like a shitty Richard Avedon photo. It's like, oh, crap. Like, that's not the pipeline of what I want to be in. I want to soak it all in from these other sources and then go make something in a completely different medium. So I think art history opened a lot of headspace and being connected to different kinds of work and different mediums that could make me excited to create, but not worried about like, oh, I want to do what that photographer did.
Takes out the comparison.
Yeah.
Do you have any advice for someone that might want to be like learn about art history, but they don't have time to go get a degree in it.
Read a book.
Just read a book.
Get a podcast.
Listen
Yeah.
to this podcast.
Listen to this podcast.
Listen to this episode.
Yeah. I love history podcasts. I mean, I don't have any specific advice.
What else do you do in your personal life to stay inspired? Do you watch a lot of films? Do you read a lot of books? Like, what is your...
It goes in waves.
Yeah.
It'll just I don't know. I'm very like in or out with stuff. I'll get very into reading and then very inspired by movies and then not watch anything for a long time or
Like
read
cyclical.
anything for a long time. What do I do in my personal life to stay inspired? Try to stay in the headspace of noticing what I think is interesting even when I'm not shooting. Like just when I'm sitting talking to people, my brain's like, is this a photo of yours? What would it be? Like what do you feel like about what you're looking at right now? How would you share this if this was your thing? Like staying in that headspace outside of shooting, I guess, is how I do that.
Yeah, observing.
Yeah.
It's an art.
But I've kind of always been like that. I've always been very just like digestive of how people sit and how their hands look. And when I was first starting to shoot and I didn't have any ideas for photos, I think that made me really nervous. Like, well, okay, you just got to get Pinterest boards and you got to just like write it all down. But after a couple of years of doing that and being like, I don't even really like this, I started falling back on like, you're very observant. You know when something.
You know when you know.
Yeah, and just trying to reverse engineer shoots to be like that. Just more hangouts, more time, more trips, more giving space for that thing to be there, and then knowing I have my cameras on me for that purpose, and being like, oh, this is how I work. This is how I make stuff.
That's cool. I think we're
Love that.
almost ready to wrap up.
Yeah, I feel like I can talk to you all day.
I've been
really
hiding the
inspiring.
yawns because there's like not much like oxygen around here, I think, or something. So
Jai hates Utah.
like
He
sucking,
says he
trying to
can't
suck in the
breathe.
oxygen. So
And
there's
I'm almost out of vodka. I'm water in my bottle you gave me.
Yeah, we've loved having you today. Thank you so much for just showing up and being so real.
Thanks, I did it for the dinner.
yeah.
Yeah, heard a lot about this.
Is there any last words of wisdom that you want to share, Ryan?
You will become far less concerned with what people think of you when you realize how seldom they do.